If I'd shared a floor with anyone, all they would hear were the sounds of soft feminine giggles and a male voice whispering. Thankfully, I had the whole entire floor to myself, so I avoided the awkward, judgmental looks from neighbours and their sneering remarks. We were in the elevator on our way up to my apartment, and as much as I tried to play hard to get, he couldn't keep his hands off me. He caressed my hips and toyed with the lace on my dress while leaving small nibbles and kisses on my shoulders. Even though it was a sure bet he would make it into my bed, I never liked to give in too easily. It makes the anticipation of the act that much more worth it. That feeling buzzed inside me and caused that all too familiar tightening sensation in my gut as I watched the buttons blink, moving up in a line. We were almost there. I slid my hand around the nape of his neck and thrust my fingers into his hair. It was smooth and soft. I could ravage it. I turned toward him, then slowly traced his bottom lip with the very tip of my tongue, which sent shivers through his entire body that even I sensed. The little ding signalled that we were at my floor, and I shimmied away, letting him stand there, watching after me for just a few seconds while he tried to regroup himself. It only took a few seconds before the elevator doors started to close for him to shake out of his stupor and slink through them, coming toward me like a predator, the hunger in his eyes that had nothing to do with the food in my fridge. The light bouncing off of his eyes in the shimmering of what glow could make it through the windows from other surrounding buildings of New York City was penetrating, and even that caused me to shiver. No touch required if you had the right look. I stopped in the middle of the living room, legs spread and hip cocked, waiting for him to come to me, which he did willingly. His stride was slow and deliberate as he studied me closely, wondering what my next move was, but not caring at the same time. Once he reached me, his lips met mine, soft and lingering and ravenous. The need I felt in that moment left me breathless as I put my hand on his chest and gave him a little nudge, which he thought meant something else entirely. I had plans for him that were going to be long and drawn out. I couldn't afford to let the eagerness eat us alive until we couldn't resist it any longer. Not so fast, I purred in the darkness. I have plans for you. His breathing was heavy, and he could barely get out the words without his voice trembling, just like his body was underneath my hand. Oh yeah. His hot breath blew on my face as he breathed the words. I nodded and responded, oh yeah. Turning to walk away, I felt his need to follow me, but I stopped him with just two more words. Stay here. I turned back to see him watching me as I moved to the kitchen and to the next freezer. Grabbing a glass from the cupboard, I knew exactly what my next step was. The ice clinked into the glass nastily as I dug some of it from the freezer, letting the cool slickness as it melted in my hand drip down my arm. At this point, I didn't care if the dress got wet. It was only going to be ruined anyway. The look in Dax's eyes, I knew this dress was about to be torn to shreds. Hyde slithered through my blood, causing the warmth in my loins and my gut to become hot like embers. This was what she thrived on, and I had to admit, so did I. My heels clicked on the floor as I made my way back to the living room, frigid glass in hand. He still stood in the same spot, so I led him over to the couch and took one slender ice cube in my fingers, setting the glass on the coffee table behind me. I saw a sly smile across his lips, and he didn't leave his face as I pushed him onto the couch and kneeled between his spread legs. The sweet shiver that we both felt at the exact same moment when I put the cube between my lips was electric. I lifted his shirt and slid the ice down the length of his chest and stomach, stopping at the waistband of his jeans, and then taking the ice into my mouth to let it melt and fill my mouth with a cold wetness that I knew we would both enjoy. He leaned his head back and made a guttural, animalistic sound deep in his throat when I placed my hand on the buckle of his belt. I began to pull the leather strap from the pant loops with ease, taking my time with the process. I swooshed the ice around in my mouth as I rubbed the crotch of his pants where I could feel the length of him underneath. He was ready for it as I was, but I knew that the longer we waited to actually get down to business, the better it would be. It was a standard practice of mine to be the best any man had ever had, and I was serious about that practice. In the interest of the ice not melting before I had time to use it, I unzipped the denim and moved his red boxes around just enough for him to spring free. I was thoroughly impressed. When I looked back up at him, he was staring at my eyes hooded and breath shallow, and the smile even wider. He knew he had something to be proud of, but then again, so did I. He just hadn't seen it yet. The dress was kind of in the way, but we would get to that shortly. He was large, with a deep network of veins that only seemed to emphasize his size instead of diminishing it, and I couldn't help but inhale sharply, the hiss of air coming out in a rush. He chuckled quietly, but the deafening calm, it was like he has laughed into a megaphone. "Oh, you won't be laughing in just a few seconds, Dax," I whispered while I ducked my head with my mouth nicely and cold and ready. His trick was always a winner, which is why it was always on standby. I wrapped my lips around him and formed a chilly vacuum with them, beginning to move down slowly and deliberately. My mouth felt stretched to maximum capacity, but it felt so good. As I wrapped my tongue around him, a groan escaped him that would have made a nun blush. If I could have smiled, I would have. Once I reached halfway down his length, I stopped and began working my way back up in the same fashion, twirling my tongue around the tip in unhurried circles. Another groan of pleasure left him as his wand wove its way into my hair. I could feel the urge in his muscles to push down, but he restrained himself. He even curbed the desire to thrust his hips. This I was appreciative of. Most men had a tendency to give in to their urges and end up nearly choking me, but he was considerate. It was about time. About damn time. I placed my hand on his hip and moved back down, picked up the pace for only a second, just to slide back up slowly once again, and letting my teeth slide along his flesh. His hand gripped my hair tighter, another moan of ecstasy tearing from him even louder than the first, jerking my head back and away as gently as the passion would allow. He planted a hungry kiss on my lips, letting his tongue slide into my open mouth like a snake. My insides clenched, my legs almost turned to jello as the kiss overtook my senses. The hardwood was cool and unforgiving on my knees as I bore down on them to keep myself from falling onto the floor in shock. He pulled back just a few centimetres, and I smelled the beer on his breath now. I wasn't even sure how I had noticed that before, but from what I could tell at the bar, he had only one, so this wouldn't be a drunken one-night stand, which I was thankful for that as well. "Where's the bathroom?" he asked, past ragged breaths. I knew exactly where this was headed, and a shiver ran through me in response as I looked into those sky-blue orbs. Cocking my head in the direction of the bedroom, past the couches, and down the hall, I breathed, "Back that way, down the hall." With one swift move, he was off the couch, and I was in his arms, and being carried down the hallway to the bedroom. The shoes clicked on the floor as the hardwood floors changed to marble, and a low whistle sounded when the automatic light switched on. "What is it you do again?" he asked as he walked me to the bed, throwing me down onto it with gusto. The soft satin sheets and mattress absorbed me, so I barely bounced, but I put my hands out to steady myself regardless. "I'm an art dealer." As soon as the words left my mouth, I realised we were done talking about my chosen profession when I spied the primal look in his eyes. He hunched over the bed, hands gripping the edges of the mattress, and his hips slightly parted. Hyde writhed within me and practically purred as I stared into his eyes, an easy grin on my face mirroring his. Then my eyes moved down to his sultry lips, not too thin and not too full, just right, and they were perfect for kissing and licking and biting. I wanted to do all of those things. I bit my lip, thinking of all the possibilities that would take place on this bed, in this room. I felt the heat rush up from below to my chest, my face forcing my nipples to become erect under the fabric of my clothes. "You look so sexy when you do that. Makes me want to do all kinds of nasty things to you." His tone was erotic and stimulating, and his voice caressed every part of me that no human hand could, causing my desire to peak to the point of bursting. Everything tingled with desire, even the satin underneath. My fingers made my senses whirl. I poked my chest out slightly and saw his eyes move down and then back up my lips. "What kind of things do you have in mind?" I let my voice drop low and deep, full of the desire I felt just looking at him. His jeans were still unzipped, but he had slid back into the confines of his boxers when he had leaned forward. "Whatever feels right, baby." Oh, he was a smooth talker, and he knew just the right words to say, and obviously the right things to do if he was now in my apartment. I reached up and shoved my hands underneath his shirt to feel the smooth expanse of skin underneath, and every ripple of hard muscle coiled and ready to pounce. I pushed the shirt up, and he let me, getting on his knees in front of me as I slid it over his head. What I saw was magnanimous. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at him. Then an image flashed into my head that I had to shake free, my nails raking across his skin and the blood pouring down that beautiful chest. It wouldn't happen. Not this time. I couldn't let her harm this gorgeous man who, with just a look, made me feel that human connection again instead of the monstrous urge to kill. But could I really stop her from creeping in? I swallowed past a dry throat and kept my mind on the objective. I wanted my mouth on him, all over him, and I wanted him inside of me. My body practically pulsated with need for him. Then Dax reached up and slid his hand underneath my skirt, into the sweet spot where I so desperately wanted him to be, not even caring to scoot my underwear to the side. His breath caught in a hiss when his fingers encountered the heat and the wetness there, his eyes not once leaving mine, and the electricity between us was palpable. His fingers began to move against me and I couldn't hold back a moan, throwing my head back and letting him know he was doing all of the right things. My body wriggled under his touch of its own volition, trying to drive him further. I moved my legs between his and used it to rub softly against him, spurring him on until his fingers moved around the fabric of my underwear and directly to the slickness underneath. Another hiss escaping from between his teeth, followed by a growl. He put his lips on mine, and as soon as they met, one finger slid inside me, eliciting a rumbling whimper from him and I in unison. I wanted him, and I wanted him now. Foreplay was nice, but not needed in this case. The urge was too great for me to deny it any longer. I pulled away from him long enough to let him know that the rest of his clothes needed to go. He pulled the jeans and the boxers down. I was looking at one of the most gorgeous men I'd ever had the pleasure of sleeping with. His skin was smooth, and I had to give him the nod of approval for shaving. It was always a good thing to see a man that landscaped, because, well, if I did, he better. What about yours, missy? He pointed to the dress as I was still wearing. I stood and moved until our chests were almost touching, his eyes meeting mine. There it was again, the connection that lingered there, almost drowning Hyde out of the edges of my awareness. A strange calm moved over me, and the passion I felt turned into something else. Passion mixed with a new need. A need to know him. After this, there would hopefully be plenty of time for that. I thought I'd give you the honours. I whispered into his neck, nibbling at the skin. He reached around and unzipped the dress in one quick motion, tore it off and made quick work of the bra and underwear. I wouldn't even bother removing my shoes. He put his hand on the nape of my neck and said, "You have no idea what you are getting yourself into. You're in serious trouble." His kiss took me to the moon and back to Earth all over again. "I'm perfectly okay with that," I retorted. And that wasn't a lie. I was confident I would love the punishment. I backed up the few steps to the bed, taking him with me with my mouth on his, until I felt the bed on the back of my knees. I took him in my hand and stroked, feeling the skin move smoothly over the hardness underneath. Without warning, I lay on the bed and he was above me, spreading my legs wide. I was ready to be taken, and from what I could see, he was more than ready to do the taking. But I knew he had something else in mind, and he knelt down on the bed between my legs and ducked his head down to begin licking me. His tongue was magic, and I succumbed to its power. I gripped the sheets, bunching them in my hands as he worked. The pleasure was building and building until I was sure I would shatter under his magical mouth. I once opened my eyes. He lingered above me, waiting for permission. I wriggled my hips under his, feeling the head rub against me, and we both sighed under the sweet friction. Without saying a single word, he placed himself at my entrance and slid into me, hot and delicious, like he was meant to be there. A gasp left me as I felt the warm stretch of him inside. Then he began to thrust, moving back and forth, gripping his back. I let him move inside me, moving my hips in harmony with his for the deepest penetration possible. My back arched underneath him as he moved above me, the pleasure continuing to build until I tumbled over the edge, every muscle in my body tightening, even lower ones contracting until falling into bliss. I pushed with my leg, signalling him to roll over so I could be on top. He took the hint, rolling onto his back and when he moved in deeper, I couldn't suppress a moan. His hand slid up my stomach and then cupped my breasts as I moved on top of him, riding until he could no longer hold it back. I was nearly spent, but wanted so much more that I felt I could go all night. No words needed to be said. All I needed to hear were the moans and groans from the man beneath me, and he more than delivered. His beautiful eyes were locked on mine, and in that moment I came for a second time, as they never left my face. Even when I could tell he was close to the brink, I never slowed. I wanted him to feel what I was feeling. Completion, unity, and ecstasy. He gripped my hips as I rocked back and forth. When I knew he was close, I hopped off and put him in my mouth. He exploded with pleasure, and the warm saltiness made its way into my mouth. It truly wasn't bad. I had more the consistency of egg white, and I wasn't the kind to spit. Pulling him out, I swallowed, licked my lips, and collapsed on the bed next to him. Something unexpected happened next. He pulled me onto his chest and wrapped his arms around me, intertwining his legs with mine until we were both asleep. The kicker? I didn't mind at all.